Hello, I'm Ray Smith, co-host of Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. My co-host Keith McDaniel is not with me for this presentation, but what I want to share with you is to give a demonstration of how a Calutron works. It was the Y12 electromagnetic separation process, and it was used during the Manhattan Project to separate the uranium-235 for Little Boy, the first atomic bomb ever used in warfare that was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan on August the 6th, 1945. It's a fairly simple physics process, and I hope you'll appreciate how that process worked by watching this video that I've created that's a demonstration of how a Calutron works. So let's see if we can bring it up now. I want to show you a demonstration of how a Calutron works. Calutron just stands for California University Cyclotron, and it was invented by Ernest Lawrence, was used at the Y-12 National Security Complex, what's called today. Back in the Manhattan Project era, it was the Y-12 electromagnetic separation plant. And I want to show you how that simple physics process works. A mass spectrometer that separates isotopes according to their mass. Imagine with me if I held up my hand and I had two rubber bands hanging down from it. I put a golf ball on one and a ping pong ball on the other. And then I spun it real quick for a half a turn. That golf ball would stretch that rubber band further than the ping pong ball. So I get two arcs. Now, the same thing happens with uranium-235 and 238. There's 3 neutrons difference in the mass of 235 and 238. That means if you put those in between two large magnets, those two isotopes, in between two large magnets, the magnet field, that magnetic field, will cause those isotopes to bend. Centrifugal force will make the 238 make a slightly larger arc than the 235. So you can catch the 235 up at the top. Now, you have to remember in 1,000 pounds of uranium ore, there's only 7 pounds of uranium-235. So you've got to separate a lot of material just to get that little bit of uranium-235 that you need for a nuclear weapon or an atomic bomb. So let me show you a little demonstration that'll show you an animation that'll show you what I just described, how uranium-235 is separated from uranium-238. So imagine between the two magnets standing on either side of this vacuum chamber, and it's causing those uranium isotopes to bend. The blue ones are the uranium-238, and the red ones represent the uranium-235. So there were 1,152 of these calutrons and 22,482 workers located at the electromagnetic separation plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, that produced the uranium-235 for Little Boy, the world's first atomic bomb ever used in warfare. A very simple physics process that had no moving parts, but that's how the calutrons work. Well, there you have it, a demonstration of how the calutrons worked at Y12. Now I'd like to show you a virtual tour of building 9204-3 at Y12, or what's commonly called Beta 3, because it was the third building that had the Beta Calutrons, the second stage of the Calutrons in it. So let's take a tour of Beta 3. So Beta 3 is one of the 9 large buildings that were used to house the Calutrons. The Calutrons were located in the highway. So these are the Calutrons. Let me show you a little closer view. And notice the red line. That was to tell you if you had any metal in your pocket, you shouldn't get any closer than that because it might pull you right up against those large magnets. Remember, it's a batch process, so you've got one here, and the material goes into the bottom and comes out at the top. Now, it was one large racetrack of 36 Calutrons during the Manhattan Project when they were separating uranium. But then after the war, when they started separating those stable isotopes, they didn't need all of that large racetrack. They needed smaller ones. So they put in shunts here. So now they have 4 smaller racetracks that they can use to separate different elements in each of the racetracks. And they did that until 1998, separating all of the elements in the periodic table here at these Calutrons. The Calutrons were used during the war to separate the uranium for little boy. But after the war, they would separate all of the elements in the periodic table. Some of them they would send over to the graphite reactor and make them radioactive, and something that started being separated in the Calutron through another process would eventually produce cardiac scan medical isotopes. So the exact same science, the exact same equipment that produced the uranium for little boy also produced these isotopes, stable isotopes, that were used as targets to produce nuclear medicine. So let me demonstrate how these Calutron works. If you look here, the first thing you have is you heat up that material that's in the charge box, and then it's attracted out between those 2 magnets. And the magnets cause it to bend, and you get that arc that causes the material to separate by its mass and go into the collector up at the top. This is the control room where the young girls would have operated those Calutrons. Actually, this one right here is Gladys Owens, and this is her picture when she came back later. She worked here from January till December of 1945, sitting on these stools, operating these cubicles, and separating that uranium. Now let's walk right down here. And remember, they were adjusting these knobs and watching these meters on each of these, one of the Calutron girls at each location.
What was the stick used for?
The stick, thank you, that's a good question. This is a grounding rod for when the maintenance people had to go in there and work on it. They'd go in and short out the high voltage capacitors before they actually went in and worked. So let me show you this plaque that was awarded to this building in recognition of its historical significance. The American Nuclear Society awarded it as a Nuclear Historic Landmark in November of 2002. So that was a tour of building 9204-3, Beta 3, that still has the Calutrons in it today that were used during the Manhattan Project and also up until 1998. They've been preserved as a part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. Another building in Y12 that is a part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park is Building 9731. It was the pilot facility for the Calutrons at Y12. Let me take you on a virtual tour of Building 9731. So these are the Alpha units. Notice how large they are, much taller than the base. This building, 9731, the pilot facility for the electromagnetic separation process. This was the first building completed on the site in 1943. The other buildings were being built, and as they were being built, they actually operated these Calutrons in this building. They started with this pilot facility, working out the kinks, and as they were developing the process, they were installing the other Calutrons. The word Calutron stands for California University Cyclotron, and it was invented by Ernest Lawrence. There were 1,152 of them here in Y12. So these are the Alpha Calutrons. No moving parts, just two large magnets, and that magnetic field separates uranium-235 and 238. Centrifugal force will cause that 238, which has 3 neutrons more than the 235, to make a slightly larger arc than the 235. So you can catch that 235 up at the top of the arc. There are 2 stages. There are alpha stages, that's the first stage, and then there were beta stages, the second stage. In 1,000 pounds of uranium ore, there's only 7 pounds of uranium-235. The first part of the process is the most difficult, just getting that slight amount of uranium-235 to be a larger percentage of the output product. And they operated these? After the war ended, they shut the Calutrons down, except for those in this building, 9731, and over in Beta 3. Those Calutrons operated until 1998, separating all of the elements in the periodic table that have stable isotopes. And some of those isotopes they were able to use by putting them into the graphite reactor to produce nuclear medicine, and other radioisotopes that were used in industry and research. The nuclear age that was introduced as a part of the Manhattan Project has resulted in nuclear power, has resulted in nuclear medicine, and tremendous technological advances that we take for granted. Even something as simple as the touch screen on your iPhone. That's origin was here in Oak Ridge. Many other examples of technological advances have come forth from the Manhattan Project. So there you have a tour of Building 9731. It has the world's only remaining alpha Calutron magnets there in Building 9731. So I hope you've enjoyed watching these virtual tours and learning how a Calutron works. Please come back and join us for another Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. And we'll see you next time.